Start. Hi, welcome everybody. Last session of the day, but we've got some really exciting speakers coming up, so I know it's going to be a good end of the day. Our first speaker is Ruby Wake, who's the National Advocacy Manager for OzHarvest, and she's going to be talking about halving food waste by 2030.
Thanks very much. I am really honoured to have the great pleasure of trying to keep you all awake at 3:30. Thanks for having me. My name's Ruby. I work in advocacy at OzHarvest. The very first thing I would love to do is acknowledge the Gumbaynggirr people whose land we're meeting on today, unceded land, and also the Kaurna people whose land I grew up on in Adelaide. The very first thing I would actually like to do is hear from you. Who has heard of OzHarvest before? Amazing. Who has heard of Use It Up, the Use It Up tape, that campaign? Great. Who heard me talk about it last year? Awesome. Okay, great. Good to know what I'm working with. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on OzHarvest for those of you who haven't heard of us before. A little bit about our household food waste campaign, Use It Up, some learnings that we've had from that over the last 12 months, and how you can get involved. So for those of you who don't know OzHarvest, you might have seen our yellow vans around the place. We have 75 now on the road across Australia. One of my favourite jokes when I'm talking is that they look like this, except they're a bit bigger. They are rescuing food mostly from supermarkets, but from lots of different places before it becomes food waste. They're intercepting that, and then they pass it on to charities who pass it on to people who need it. And we rescue almost 200 tonnes of food every single week across Australia. So we're really known as a food rescue organisation, but that's just one part of the way we're taking action on food waste. We work to tackle food waste across the entire system. Our work is driven by these 4 pillars. So we feed people in need, that's through the vans and through a few other projects. We educate. I know there's some teachers here today. We have a whole curriculum-aligned program all about food waste and nutrition that's free for teachers. We innovate for social impact. We have an awesome arm that trial different products with food waste, utilising them to create products. And we advocate, which is where I come in, for sustainability and also for systems change and systems scale solution around food waste. So what are we up against? I'm sure this is not news to many of you, but I'll just go there very quickly for context. Food waste, we know, is a huge contributor to climate change. Up to 10% of greenhouse gas emissions can be linked to food waste alone, which is massive. That is over 5 times the entire aviation sector. So it's not a little kind of side problem. It's a big one when we're talking about climate. And it's not just climate, of course. Food waste is wasting all of the water, land, soil, energy. The list goes on. In Australia, a huge amount of food is going to waste. We are comparatively very wasteful. We have about a 312 kilo per capita level of food waste every year, and that is compared to something like 75 kilos in a place like Germany, for example. So we're big wasters here in Australia, and something that always blows my mind every time I think about it is that in Australia we need land the size of Victoria to grow food for the bin. It's wild. And at huge costs to the economy. In a cost of living crisis, I can think of many better ways to be spending that kind of money. And the largest chunk of it is coming from our homes. So the recent UNEP report that just came out, 1 billion meals every day across the world is being wasted from our homes. It's huge, and it's costing households thousands of dollars a year. In Australia, this looks like 2.5 million tonnes, so massive, massive amounts. But interestingly, because there's such a huge amount coming from the home, it's the largest sector in Australia that food waste comes from. It gives us these really big economic, social, environmental opportunities with household action alone. So great space for change. And sitting behind all of this, we've got federal government targets to halve food waste by 2030. They've set those targets and aligned to them, but we're yet to see any policy meaningfully that's going to get us there. We advocate for that kind of policy, but in the meantime, we're also into taking action at home and having a focus on avoidance if we're going to be meeting those targets and working with consumers. So how are we doing all of that? like I think some of the best things, it started with some really robust research. So a couple of years ago, we partnered with the brilliant team at Monash University, the Behaviour Works team. I'm sure some of you have worked with them before. They are incredible. We produced a report with them. We wanted to know what behaviours actually make a difference when it comes to reducing food waste in the home. We chatted with over 40 food waste experts and surveyed over 1,600 households. And we wanted to know what behaviours are likely. That's what the surveying the households is for, what's actually likely to be taken up in the home. Houses are busy, we don't want to be adding extra activities, all that kind of stuff. Likelihood across the bottom, and then impact, what actually makes a difference when it comes to food waste. That's what the experts were for. I won't go into this is all on our website, but basically the most important thing that it showed us was that the two really key behaviours to focus on, the ones that we know will make a really big difference and are really likely to be taken up, are one, having a designated space in the fridge or the pantry where you put food that needs using next, a use it up shelf. And number two, cooking a meal at least once a week just with that food that you already have that needs to be used up, so a use it up meal. Obviously, that's nice that they're both use it uppy. We bundled them into one behaviour. We called it Use It Up, and we launched a campaign in 2021 called Use It Up. And when we launched it, there was a big media launch. We had ambassadors and influencers targeting those two key behaviours, having the shelf and cooking a use it up meal once a week. This is an always on campaign, and we use any channel that we can to talk about those two behaviours. To help with the first behaviour, having a use it up shelf, you might have seen the use it up tape. It's a product that I placed down here. Basically, it's a paper tape. You use the tape to mark out either an entire shelf or a space in the fridge or the pantry where you put food that needs using up first. It looks like this. It's really bright. It's got lovely OzHarvest branding on it, and it's really yellow. And the idea is it's a visual tool for the whole household to see what needs using first. So when you open the fridge or you open the pantry, you can see what's got the use it up tape on it or what's on the use it up shelf, and it's really clear to know what needs to be used next. And we know now that the tape is reducing food waste by an average of 40% in the houses that it's in. So yes, in some ways it's like a fun gimmicky tool that's great to have people chatting about food waste for, but it's also really functionally reducing food waste in people's homes by 40%. And we really see it as a gateway behaviour. The reason I think it works so well is because it's super easy. It's not about trying to get people on board the idea of food waste. No one loves the idea of wasting food. It's not about an education piece or any values kind of setting. It's just a behavioural intervention at the time when it matters, when people open the fridge, and I think that's why it works really well. So we love it for that. And on that, it's all well and good to know what you need to use up with the tape, but you also then have to know what to do with it. So we had the other behaviour, which is cook a use it up meal once a week. When we launched the campaign, we also launched it with a whole suite of recipes that our chefs created that were using commonly wasted ingredients, that were really interchangeable, that we thought were really like fun and easy, all around building kitchen confidence and just giving people different ideas about how to use the food that they might have. But what we've been finding, and I think this goes quite well with the previous talks before me, is that what's been performing much better in the last 12 months, to no surprise, is short form video content, and mostly hacks and tips and tricks rather than full recipes, and that is what we have shifted to with really great results. So instead of saying to people, here's a recipe, you need these 3, 5, 7 ingredients, it's just, oh, you've got heaps of veggies, have you thought about nachos? Have you thought about fritters? Have you thought about a green curry? It's just giving people the idea and that little bit of inspiration, and we find that people do have significant, like people can cook their own food, you know, everyone has to do it every day. They have the skills. It's just about that extra little bit of idea so they don't look at that broccoli that's wilting in the back of the fridge, I've got one, we've all got one, and not know what to do with it. It's just having that extra bit of inspiration and being able to do something for it. And we have an amazing crew of influencers that really support our cause, and of course OzHarvest chefs as well, who are experts in this space that we use to create all that content, and it's been really, really successful. Behind all of that, of course, it's a huge library of assets. We really like to keep it simple with this one message, use it up. And we love to lean on our very strong yellow branding, which a few of you have already commented about. It's strong. We know that it works. We did a House of Brand survey a couple of years ago that showed that 92% of Australians would trust food waste messaging if it came from OzHarvest. So we use that to our advantage. We use that for impact. We lean on that, and we know that it works really well. So we also co-brand where we can to amplify that message, which is where you might come in. So it's also worth mentioning, if people want to order the tape, it's free. We give it away for free. We've got some amazing philanthropists that support our work, and that enables us to give away the tape for free for individuals that order online. If we partner with people, we just do a cost-covering kind of structure. We're not making money from this. This is not revenue raising for us, so we need to be working in partnership to get this message out there. So what does it look like? Well, councils are obviously a no-brainer for us. You're talking to consumers, you're doing your own waste education and avoidance programs. We work with dozens of councils all across Australia. Anything from councils who just order some tape and do what they want with it, or developing an entire co-branded campaign with us that's tailored to their community, and everything in between. Just some examples recently that we've been working on councils with. We've got councils that are putting it in FOGO bins and giving it away with FOGO bins. Some councils are doing that. Some are just using it as education events, as like a tool and a little gimmicky thing to bring people in to have a chat. We know it works, but it's definitely giving something tangible to people that's free that can help with that engagement as well. Or using the Use It Up recipes, the kitchen hack content, all of that kind of stuff as part of like a food waste package. We know some councils have done, so they've used the content or they've used the tape or everything, you know, lots of different ways that can look for you. That will look different for everyone. On the councils bit, just quickly, the few of you who were here last year and heard me speak, we had a then upcoming trial with the City of Casey. They heard about the tape, they loved the idea of it. They were like, could you please develop a whole program around the tape? Here's $30,000. And we said, yes. So we did that. We did a big survey to their community and asked them, you know, what would you like to see? What kind of messaging would help? I used to work for council in community engagement, so I just put that hat on. We asked them, how long do you want it to be? Most people said 4 weeks. We said, that's long, but okay. We did a 4-week Use It Up challenge with recipes, activities for the whole household, the tape, magnets, emails, an online community, everything, you name it, so comprehensive. For the people that completed the entire program and the survey at the end, they reduced their food waste by an average of 85%, which blows my mind. But there was 17 people of the over 140 that signed up for the program and said that they wanted to be a part of it. So really good learning for us. I think we knew that already, that light touch is good, keep it simple is good. This kind of approach, of course, works very deep dive with really small numbers. And we are one organisation trying to do food waste across Australia, so we keep it simple and we're just focusing on the tape and that content, but a great learning. And if you've got people in your community that you think this would work for, if you have an existing community group that you think would love to do some stuff on food waste, we have all of this now, so we could do it with you, but we're focusing on the tape and the content, which we know works really well. In the spirit of keeping things really simple, one thing that we've done recently that has worked so well is working with state government to support a local government campaign. So very recent, very local, we love it. We now partner with the EPA under a Love Food Hate Waste partnership. They supported us to develop 25,000 co-branded tapes. You can see the lovely Love Food Hate Waste logo on the packaging and the tape itself. And then we also developed some co-branded content with them, recipes, hacks, all that kind of stuff. And that means because they have supported that, we have been able to offer that to 6 councils in New South Wales for free as part of a trial, which is really exciting because we know for a lot of councils, budget is obviously a limiting factor. So if we can get state government departments to step in with the resources, which often they do have, and then offer that for free to councils, this is a really wonderful way that that's happening. A great recent example. It's not just governments that we're working with, businesses too. One example that's very relevant for us here today, our friends at RecycleSmart, we have some in the audience. If you don't know RecycleSmart, they are amazing. They're here at the moment if you want to go and talk to them in the exhibition space as well. They're a doorstop collection service for tricky to recycle items. they obviously can't collect food waste, but we're keen to elevate the impact on food waste, and so just made a bulk order of Use It Up tapes. And when the Recycle Smart drivers went and collected the tricky to recycle items from people's doorsteps, they would give them a Use It Up tape. And so that's just a way that we can work with businesses to elevate businesses' impact, amplify the message in a really, really simple way. We love it. Thank you. Another really cool thing that's happened in the last year, we've had a bunch of organisations across the world who are interested in the idea of the tape and want to work with us, and one that's come to fruition is the Netherlands Nutrition Centre, which is a not-for-profit in the Netherlands who have a Food Waste Action Week. They heard about the tape, they loved it. Long story short, under a licensing agreement, they created 40,000 rolls of Eerst op tape, which means first up tape, and it's gone really well. They've done some local tests, consumer testing with controls, which is exciting, which is something that we have done on a small scale. They did it on a much larger scale, and there's some great indicative results there, so it's really cool to see it works in other locations. And I have to also give a shout out, anytime you see any of our content anywhere in this kind of way, that space was donated by JC Decaux or Cartology or any. We don't have the budget for this kind of out-of-home ad spending, so we have some amazing partners who are able to offer that to us. It just helps to get the message out there in lots of different places. And because of all these incredible partnerships, the tape is now in 100,000 households across Australia, which is really exciting, or 140,000 if we include our friends in the Netherlands. Which is saving 4 million kilos of food waste per year. So it's not small numbers, and it's really, really exciting for us. I think it's also worth mentioning for us, the tape is not a silver bullet. We're not here to say the tape should be in every household in Australia. That's not how it should work. We see it as a gateway behaviour. It's something that I think people get. We know that it prompts other behaviours around shopping and cooking. The tape is 10 metres long. We hope and we hear from people that that is long enough to form a few good routines and a few good habits around it. We don't want people to be ordering rolls and rolls of tape from us. We're not here to create lots of waste. It's a prompt, it's a behavioural nudge, and we know that it works, and we know that households are saving lots of money and obviously reducing food waste, which is great as well. So that's really how we see it. We would love for you to join us. As I mentioned, this campaign is always on. We know Use It Up works. It's simple. It's creating big changes. And I know lots of you care about reducing food waste. So we would love to work with you wherever you're coming from, whether that's councils, state government, schools, businesses, everyone. We've got less than 6 years now to achieve our goal of halving food waste by 2030. So any way that we can do that, we'd love to hear about it. These people, one of them is me. This is the team. Mon has been here at previous conferences. She is the Use It Up campaign manager. I've just moved into an advocacy space doing a bit more government relations, lobbying, to get some kind of systems level policy change, but we both work in this space and we're always keen to connect. So thank you so much. I might just add that there is a box of Use It Up tape at the back. I have 200. I do not want to take them home with me, so please take handfuls, and there's postcards out there as well.
You want to answer any questions? Thanks, Ruby. You've still got a couple of minutes for individual questions. Have any questions come online, Olivia? Any from the audience at this stage? Okay, we'll wait till the end. Thanks, that was awesome.
Thanks.
Our next presenter is Clytie Binder from the Churchill Fellow. She's going to be talking to us about community composting here and abroad, which sounds really exciting.
Hi everybody, my name's Clytie. I'm going to be talking about community composting here and abroad, as was just mentioned. And I'd like to sort of explain that this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the different shapes and forms of community composting, both overseas and here in Australia. Part of it was made up from a Churchill Fellowship that I did last year, and then my, passion for this particular subject is sort of everywhere I go, I can't help but look out for community composting. So I also wanted to, while I'm giving this talk about basically what is community composting. As I said, some examples, and then how it potentially fits into the patchwork of organic waste management. And I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of this land, the Gumbaynggirr people, and also for the First Nations people of the lands that I travelled through with my Churchill Fellowship last year. And first of all, I just wanted to sort of give a bit of a brief overview of what is community composting, because it's a little bit blurry, I suppose, but I would like to propose that community composting is where the composting process usually includes either a group of people sharing the process of composting, or by taking the material from numerous places. So whether that be, a school composting the tuck shop waste, or the parents' family bring in their waste from home, or whether it be a community garden that's composting the local scraps from the people that live near the garden, or also neighbourhood composting, so people collecting waste from their neighbours through Share Waste app or just through mutual agreement. Even if that's just one person that's giving some scraps for the person's chickens and then they give them some eggs in return or something. In my mind, that's community composting. But it can also be larger. Sometimes it's seen in retirement homes or in prisons or numerous different settings where there's an element of a group involved. It tends to have a fairly significant volunteer component. So sometimes people have paid roles, and usually they're connected to a group already. For example, they might be the teacher aide at the school, or they might be community development worker in a community centre or something like that. Generally, there's not very many people who are actually paid to do community composting unless they have a collection business. It tends to be small to mid-scale in scale, and usually quite low tech and very handmade. And as a result, the quality of compost tends to be quite high. Not always, but generally speaking, tends to be very little contamination. So both the feedstock and the finished compost tend to be stay local. So the finished compost tends to be used pretty close to where it was produced. So the benefits of community composting are pretty huge, because it's not just about diverting waste from landfill. It's also about forming connections in community. So I'm not going to go through this whole long list, but suffice to say that there are huge environmental benefits of composting generally, but also of the fact that because it's staying local, it's not creating extra emissions through the collection and transport and processing of the material. So there's very little or no use of fossil fuel machinery. It tends to link with a lot of other environmental initiatives as well, such as bush care or, urban agriculture, things like that. But the health and social benefits are often not very well captured. So we know that there's a loneliness epidemic, there's huge health issues abounding in our society with obesity and preventable diseases, social disconnect and crime rates. This type of activity, which gets people out and about into their community, producing compost and relating to each other in the process, can have a lot of really great spin-off effects. Just wanted to point out that the picture there is from the Bronx, and that was part of a community composting group. And the woman I spoke to who runs that particular community composting program, it's through the New York Botanic Gardens, was saying that people in the Bronx are really struggling to keep food on the table, and so composting is quite low on their list of priorities. And so because of the connection with growing food, she found that people got very involved in composting once they realised how cheaply and easily they could improve their food growing capacity. And then also the urban effect of, you know, getting to know the neighbours and all of that sort of thing had a really great spin-off effect. And then you can see that these people here are actually using some of the excess compost to look after the local street trees. So it's not just about growing more food, it also began to be a neighbourhood beautification process as well, bringing everyone together at the same time. Just a big quick background on me and how I got into this. And it has become, you know, this is the number one health warning on compost, is that it is addictive. And, you know, once you start talking to compost nerds, they don't shut up. So my background was in permaculture and then in community gardens. I started a community garden near where I live, and also worked with not-for-profit community groups in environmental education and all that kind of thing, and schools as well. I started working for Brisbane City Council in the waste and resource recovery services in education. And in my research, I discovered this amazing community composting initiatives throughout New York City. And I just couldn't stop reading about it, and was just absolutely fascinated. And so together with the team that I was working in with council, we started to set up community compost hubs in Brisbane. And I was just really excited about how, just what I saw, you know, the stories that were coming out about people. You know, like, for example, there was one couple that drove their car to an elderly couple that drove their car to a compost hub. And when, you know, I got chatting with them and I said, oh, where do you live? And they told me their suburb. And I said, well, actually, there's one a lot closer to where you live. You probably don't need to drive here, thinking, you know, it's sort of defeating the purpose. But he said, well, you know, I'm sort of 78, and if I don't drive once a week, I'll lose my licence. So this is the opportunity for me and the wife to get in the car, and we take our little compost bucket and we go and do our composting. So, you know, there's just lots of really cute, lovely, heartwarming, community connecting stories around these. So then I found out about this Churchill Fellowships and applied to see if I could go overseas, specifically to New York. That was the big place I wanted to go because I'd heard so much about their community compost program, and go and explore it. So I extended that to other countries as well. On my return, which was last year, you know, the bug hadn't got any smaller having travelled. It actually got worse, and so I was just obsessed with, you know, how can we support community composting more in Australia? And so I met up with some people who think the same as me, and we've started to form this national organisation called LOCAL, which stands for Local Community Composting Alliance, which is, the idea is to connect community composting initiatives across the country to, you know, provide networking opportunities, and also to advocate for including community composting as part of the national conversation about how we manage our organic waste. Just so you know, if you're interested in doing a Churchill Fellowship, I encourage you to do it. It's open to all Australians, and it's an opportunity to go overseas to learn something that you can't just find here in Australia. So you get paid to go over, research something, and then come back and share your learnings, which is what I'm doing here. So my Churchill Fellowship was exploring education methods and partnership models to support community composting, and I travelled to parts of Canada, the USA, Cuba and Mexico. In Los Angeles, I found, surprisingly, I didn't expect to see a lot of composting going on in a concrete jungle like Los Angeles, but I found an incredible network of community composters. And this is in a state where they've really had a lot of centralised industrial compost collection for quite a number of years. They're one of the early adopters. But a lot of communities are keen to take back that resource to improve their soils and connect with each other, and especially around growing food. There's a group called LA Compost, which is very well organised, and they manage those hubs really well. The LA Compost hubs are built in places where people coexist, in churches, schools, gardens and workplaces. Each hub reflects the community in which it's located, but they all serve the same purpose. They compost organics locally while creating shared spaces for people to connect with each other and the natural world. In Cuba, I was really fascinated by how local food is grown. Only 7% of the population own a car, so everything has to be walkable distance, including where you get your food and what you do with your organic waste. So they have these organoponicos, which are like large sort of urban farms, and they use a lot of vermiculture and mix it with biochar. They're constantly researching organic learnings on how to improve the soil without use of petrochemicals. And just out of interest, the guy who was showing me around showed me this little seed tray, and I thought, why is he showing me that? Polystyrene, you know, what's so good about that? And he had this whole pile of them, and he said that they're 36 years old, and it has been used over and over and over, and that's what happens in Cuba and it's an economic necessity, but it's also a real learning that we can all take, that we just, you know, that would have been thrown out, you know, many years ago. We would have said, oh, that's beyond it, that's useless, we can't use that anymore. But yeah, that's just washed and reused many, many times. In Toronto, they have a strong reduce and reuse set of programs that the council support, and one of them is community composting. While I was there, they were really bringing in FOGO in a big way as well, and I know that the community composters were just feeling a little bit worried because the funding was starting to move away from them. So I think that was something that really came out for me in this trip, was to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and to value the connections that community composters have made with their communities in the languages that they speak and in the ways that they understand, because it's hard for councils to communicate messaging directly to community, but community talks to community. So in any sort of new system that's coming in, a new bin such as FOGO, I think it's important to keep funding those community scale approaches as well, really crucial. So New York City, as I said before, is the big one that I was excited to see. They had the City of New York had a really good relationship with a few not-for-profits, which meant that they had their household FOGO bins, which were opt-in at the time, plus their smart compost collection bins, which were compacting and had an attached app associated with it, plus the community compost food drop-off areas throughout community gardens and at farmers markets. So this is looking at New York City. All of those dots are food scrap collection drop-off points, so there's quite a lot of them. The orange ones are the smart bins, and the green ones are the community compost food scrap drop-off points. And all of those community compost approaches were really varied in size, scale, and technology. The one at the top there is sort of a small earth machine that then went on to the curing piles. Those two there were right at Hudson River Park. And so the apartment block behind it was the most expensive apartment block in New York City. And the guy that was running this compost was so excited that those people had the view of his compost piles. And the one below it was making compost tea in Battery Park City, and that is, again, a very highly dense part of Manhattan. And they actually have a little warehouse with all, using like forklifts and things to have their compost tea up here and their different processing. So, you know, this is all happening right in the city centre, not miles and miles away. It's all very localised. The other ones are different, you know, like bay system composting, aerated static piles, hand-turned by volunteers, and different systems that different people had developed. Like I say, right in the centre of Manhattan. And really sadly, at the end of last year, the City of New York defunded this community composting, 100% defunded in favour of FOGO. And so, again, I'm just really trying to push that point that I think that's a real mistake, because these are the people who also promoted home composting. They ran all the master composter courses. They did all this community outreach and, you know, talking about contamination and the whole public buy-in. So I think that was a real mistake on behalf of New York City, and I really hope that we don't repeat those problems here. And one of the highlights as well for me was a very small little community garden in Seattle. It was at the Danny Wu Community Garden, which is a garden which is basically mostly Chinese elders growing culturally appropriate food. And these young uni students would spend their Saturdays collecting food scraps from local restaurants and converting it into compost to donate to the gardeners. I just was amazed how this is a real example of just community composting, is just really ordinary people doing ordinary things. Ordinary people doing extraordinary things, because they're turning other people's waste into compost to be used locally to grow food. But they really did it with so much joy and love and care. It was quite touching, actually. It was and surprising how you know, how joyful they were. Another big standout for me was when I visited a prison near Seattle. In this prison, they actually have a whole black soldier fly larvae processing. They do worm farming. They have chickens and they grow food. The food that they grow is, you know, enriched with the worm castings, and they donate those foods to local schools and homeless groups. And the transformative effect of this was so impressive. Just as a quick quote, one of the prisoners said, "My hope is that when I'm released, I will be like the compost and be used by society to produce a harvest that will benefit others." And this was a guy who'd grown up in gangs and murdered people and things like that. I heard lots of those amazing stories there. So just quickly, the key findings are that community composting is not well measured or researched, and I think that's where it falls through the cracks, and councils often don't think about it when they think, how are we going to manage our organic waste? Especially in country towns or remote areas, it may not be feasible or viable to bring in a central industrialised composting arrangement. You know, this is a great opportunity for communities to rejuvenate local soils, build community, and tick a really good environmental box. If you want to read my full report, you can just go to the Churchill Trust, and you can download my report. And if you want to find out more about the Local Community Compost Alliance, local, you can just go to local with a double C for community compost envirocomm.org. Thank you.
Thanks, Clytie, that was great. Our next speaker is Sarah Frazer, who is a senior consultant at EnviroCom Australia, and she's going to be talking about curbside bin inspections, a behaviour change focus group opportunity.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to my presentation about curbside bin inspections. I know curbside bin inspections might not sound too exciting, but hopefully today is exciting what I'm going to share. So just a bit of background about EnviroCom's history of doing bin inspections. We've been doing them for many years, and we've kind of evolved or changed over the last couple of years because we want to improve overall, but also from the increased demand of bin inspections. We've had quite a lot of an increase, which some people might have noticed, and across the whole industry. And I think a lot of it's probably stemmed from COVID, where unfortunately it seems everyone forgot how to recycle after COVID. So yeah, that increased demand has kind of stemmed from that period. So in the past, we used to print out an address list and manually enter the contamination, the volumes and things like that, and then manually enter it back at the computer in the office. It was mostly focused on the amount of bins we would get to and policing, not educating as much, like still doing education with the tags, but more focusing on that policing aspect of it. We mostly used stickers as well, quite large stickers that almost covered most of the lid. So currently, and the last couple of years, we've started using an app. So I'll talk about the app a bit further later. The app itself obviously removes that manual entry, really focusing on the community education and making that content really suit that community. So for example, having tags with multiple languages on them that suit that community and things like that. And having tags rather than stickers that allow for that education to be taken inside and not just permanently attached to the bin. And as I've talked about, that larger increased demand, especially the last year or so, much more people, councils in particular, interested in those inspections. So what I'm mostly going to talk about today is an opportunity we've seen while doing these bin inspections, is the resident interactions we have. So anyone who's done a bin inspection, you do encounter residents. Sometimes they're not too happy to see you. Sometimes they are thrilled to see you. So historically, we probably only recorded the particularly bad or irate residents that we maybe thought council would be good to know that that person is around. But we've recognised this opportunity that any interaction is worth recording or observing. So that's what I'm mostly going to talk about today. So this more holistic approach allows for that more targeted education and engagement opportunity rather than just focusing on bin numbers. And what we do is we don't approach people at all. We don't ask people anything. It's purely from the people approaching us and engaging with us. So to make us more approachable, we have changed the way we present ourselves out in the community. You can see our sign there. That's on some of our high-vis clothing, as well as our trolley that we carry around with all the collateral. So that makes us more approachable, kind of like a meter reader. They know what we're doing. We're not just some random person walking along the street. And we inspect during daylight hours, so that makes us more in the community when people are out and about themselves. We might carry some extra collateral from that council as well, their waste guide, extra brochures and things like that. So again, we can create that further education rather than just purely your bin is incorrect kind of education. So in relation to behaviour change, there are many models out there. This is the model we've decided best aligns with these Kerbside conversations. So with this behaviour change continuum, you can see it moves back and forward across those points that people might be at a certain point when they are learning a new thing or changing to become what we want them to do. So you can see there awareness, understanding, believe, achieving, sustaining. So obviously we want to create that behaviour change and make that habit stay. And when we engage them with a Kerbside conversation, they could be at any point along here, but the ideal way we want them is obviously from left to right, getting to the very right eventually when we do those Kerbside conversations. So Kerbside conversations and behaviour change do a few things, and bin inspections already have methods of supporting behaviour change. So they challenge behaviours. Most households, the individual thinks they're already doing the right thing. So when they get a bin inspection tag saying they're doing the wrong thing, that's challenging that behaviour. So hopefully they spread that message across when they thought they were doing the right thing. It demonstrates an interest. So as we know, there's a lot of that mentality of it all goes to landfill, what's the point? So us going out there inspecting the bin lets them know that we do care and we are sending it to the MRF and it is getting all recycled, and we want everyone to be doing that. And it raises awareness. So we don't see what the person does with the tag, but we hope they take it inside and tell the household, tell all their friends and family. As we know with any community engagement, we do hope they're speaking to other people in their community. So what the Kerbside conversations add to this is personalisation to the behaviour change methods and allow for more effective interventions and on that behaviour change continuum. The additional data from these conversations also allows for more targeted engagement and education initiatives to be developed, because you're getting that more nuanced information from a conversation. So we have been recording these Kerbside conversations since May last year. EnviroCom nationally have done just a bit over 100,000 bin inspections and talked to 814 residents. So this is from 3 states, Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria. Most of these results are from metropolitan Melbourne, but they are spread across those 3 states. And we started recording them in May, but it wasn't all of the bin inspections we do. It was just a slow introduction across all of the contracts that we have. So when we started capturing this dialogue, we obviously planned what kind of things we were going to capture with that Kerbside conversation. And these few items here are what we decided would be worthwhile. So the discussion topic, what did we discuss with that resident? Material type, if it was applicable, any other notes or comments, and then finally their attitude at the start of the engagement and at the end of the engagement, which is very important. So something we've realised is capturing this data is a work in progress. It's very much a trial kind of thing. We've only been doing it for about a year, and we're definitely updating the data we're collecting as we see trends in our results. So I'll show you that a bit later on. So the discussion topics, so you can see there, we've got waste stream, acceptable materials. So we only do bin inspections, or this data is only from recycling and FOGO bins. Inspection program overall, inspection program about their tag or collateral that was on their bin, neighbour using their bin, and beyond the bin discussions, the MRF, the compost facility, and then any other non-waste council issue. So you can see there predominantly acceptable materials and the inspection program overall. So this is great because that's what the bin inspection program is all about. We want people doing the right thing in the bin. And sorry, lost where I am in my So, yes, they're the topics we obviously would predominantly expect to talk about in those bin inspections, but obviously it allows for other conversations around those other topics to be had as well. Something that I don't have on here, but our results also showed that all of these results were from a fairly evenly split of what type of contamination that person had in their bin. So it didn't matter if they had no contamination, a rejectable bin, high, low, medium kind of contamination rating. It was fairly spread across what type of people behaviours were encountering. So the first kind of material types discussed with recycling. These percentages are from every material type discussed, so a resident might have discussed more than one with us. So probably no surprise to anyone who does waste audits, soft plastics and bagged recycling are up there. And you can also see other is the second predominant material. And all of these materials, or most of these materials, the higher proportion of them are contamination, but you can still see some acceptable materials were discussed as well. The other materials were mostly disposable paper products like paper towel, tissues, wet wipes. So we've, as I said, updated when we've seen results, so we've now added paper towel to our contamination list. The next one is material types discussed with FOGO bins. So other was the very standout predominant material discussed, and I think this is because most people don't get FOGO bins wrong. Generally, in our data, we see most people get FOGO bins right, and the contamination rate is quite low. So other predominantly was soft plastics, but that was only 17% of that 60%. All the other materials in there were very random, odd items that didn't have, there was not a consistent kind of contamination across those. And then you can see liners and general food accepted items in the FOGO bin. Well, liners could have been accepted or not accepted depending where you lived. So most of those discussions were around the acceptability of items that are accepted, not so much contamination items. Often with the FOGO bin inspections, because FOGO is mostly correct, it did turn to a recycling bin conversation. So often in those FOGO bin inspections, we did talk about recycling as well because it's the trickier, harder topic. So our attitudes at the start and end. So you can see there we had very hostile / negative, somewhat hostile negative, around 14%, and it went down to 3%. And then, of course, with a decrease of negative, we're going to have an increase of positive. So our positive interactions went from 55 to 90%. So generally, if we are seeing people positive at the end of an education conversation, we can be reasonably confident that they're going to be moving along that behaviour change continuum and hopefully sustaining that behaviour and creating a behaviour change. So because we've educated them, they've talked to us, they've had a positive experience, they will hopefully, do that behaviour now, and we've hopefully had a positive change on their what they do. So bin inspection programs designed to collect data and provide opportunities to challenge individual behaviours are great, but the better designed programs of the future will need to support the skills or upskilling of educators and engagement officers rather than just inspectors. The opportunities that arise from this approach are enormous and include opportunities to understand today's community behaviours and foresee the next or emerging trends or concerns in the community. But even more simple than these great aspirational goals is the realisation of the waste education holy grail, talking to people about their behaviours on their terms when they are choosing to listen. So is your Kerbside bin inspection program all about bin numbers, or is it supportive of Kerbside conversations? Thank you.
Thanks, that was really interesting. I have a couple of questions, but I'll wait till the end. Our last speaker, lucky last, is Michelle Wilkinson, who's a program coordinator for Halve Waste, and she's going to talk about New Aussies Recycle 2, which sounds intriguing.
Thank you. Hi everyone, I'm aware I'm the last person standing holding up you and a drink, so hopefully we can have a snappy 15 to 20 minutes. So Halve Waste is a waste and recycling education program based around Albury-Wodonga region, and we support 18 councils between the start of the Murray and the South Australian border on both sides of the river. And we have an interesting funding model. About 13 or 14 years ago, a lot of our local councils were closing landfills, and our landfill in Albury accepts material from 5 local councils surrounding. And we worked out that that was going to be full by 2020 if we didn't do something drastic. So that drastic ended up being adding our FOGO bins. So we're in our 10th year of FOGO bins. And we also charge an education levy for every tonne of material that comes to our landfills. So we don't always have to go out and search for funding to educate our local community. So I'd really encourage you to look at that model, build it into your waste collection contracts if you don't run a landfill. So this is a bit of a fun project that has led, it's an unintended project, it wasn't part of our KPIs. And it's led to some really interesting community projects as well. So a bit about our community. There's about 100,000 people in Albury-Wodonga. We've got 4 councils that have this 3-bin system. We've got a small general waste bin and it gets collected fortnightly. So you have to sort your waste. And we do bin inspections as well, and they're awesome community engagement. And you have to have a bin inspection if you want to get a bigger bin as well. So great opportunities there. What we were finding is we're actually quite a traditional, I guess, community. We only, about 15 years ago when we started thinking about 3 bins, we only had about less than 2% of people that weren't born in Australia, so pretty Anglo community. We have a migrant resettlement area, so we had a lot of immigrants after the Second World War, Greece and Eastern Europe and lots of places like that, but again, very Anglo community, and 2nd and 3rd generation, most people had English as their language at home. And that flowed into our advertising and our collateral. So lots of word-heavy stuff, lots of white people in our ads, and so that was the main messages. And so we thought, great, 3 bins launch, we've got low contamination, everyone's getting on with it, right? So great, set and forget, we can go start working on some other projects in the community. And then we started to notice that we had a lot more people from war-torn communities being resettled in our area. So Wagga and Albury are some key areas where we had a lot of refugees resettled from places like Bhutan, Africa, the Middle East, and now even places like Ukraine. So we started to see that population of refugees in particular increase, but also people that were not born here as well resettling to the region. So we were starting to notice that, you know, at those curbside bin inspections, or where we were seeing a lot of contamination or littering or just very confused people, that a lot of them obviously weren't able to respond to our traditional ways of messaging and engagement. So what did we do? We were actually approached by places like the Red Cross, who run a lot of the resettlement programs. And just as part of their English as a second language workshops, we're actually asked to come along and just talk about the different things that fill up people's bins. So we had our waste educators go and run some of these sessions, but we were finding that, you know, we were taking things that packaging that we bought in our houses, and probably wasn't really relatable to a lot of people. So we actually started asking a lot of the global food stores and places like that to give us some more typical examples of products that people bought. And we started having like a separate kit for these different workshops. And we also run tours of our waste management centre. We've got a bus and we've got a group of educators, and so we started running specific tours for our different language groups, and we'd engage with one of them to actually translate for us. So it was a bit of a planning exercise because obviously it takes a bit more time for someone to translate as you're going along. But lots of good conversations and laughing, and I think too having those key, just stuff to point at. We can all relate to sort of food packaging, and just lots of really good conversations that came out of those tours. And one of the little side projects, we've got a really awesome reuse shop that you can see here down the bottom as part of our waste management centre. And contrary to popular belief, refugees do not get settled with a lot of stuff. They get one fork, one knife, one mug per person in their household. So we actually connected them with the group. They're a disability support agency that run our reuse shop, and so we actually started putting a voucher to the reuse shop in their new arrivals pack, as well as showing them how to use their bins, so they could actually come and get some more stuff to support them through that. And then out of that, because not everyone can come on a tour or can get to one of those workshops, a lot of people work, so we started putting some of the more appropriate photos into some of our collateral. And then, I guess we probably thought, yep, set and forget, print that, print a few bin stickers, job done, good to go. But we actually started getting contacted by a lot of places that rented out like motel rooms or units to newly arrived migrants, and started using them as really good engagement tools. So some of our staff would just literally stand in the car parks and just have the bins there and use those pictures as conversation starters. And I think some of the feedback we got was people just really appreciated the fact that we'd gone to the effort of having, like, all we did was translate one sentence. But a really good, someone actually cares that I'm doing the right thing here. So this block of units has a doorway for each of the 4 units, so then we'd put up the posters for that. And with motels, we have a lot of itinerant workers for fruit picking and those sort of industries, and so we actually did these posters and got them laminated for the motels without the translation. So one week, someone might write that sentence in Korean, and then the motel operator would wipe it off, and the next week it might be in Filipino. So a real help to them. Because what we really found, I guess, is that there's perception where you're seeing litter on the road or people not sorting their bins properly, is that they don't care, but actually they really care. They've just never had to do this before. So I guess the benefits go beyond the collateral itself, probably just a bit of a tool to get us in the door, really. I'm going to keep it really short and sharp. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got questions, that's great, but really encourage you to get out and talk to the community and listen to what they're asking for. It's a project that we really never envisaged doing, but we've actually been using these posters right across our region now. They're really easy, I guess, to translate, but not only that, just as a bit of a door opener for those different communities. We get invited to a lot of multicultural events now where we just never would have been asked before, because I guess, we weren't seen as part of their community. So something really small can grow into something big just by, I guess, listening to your community. Thank you.
So if all of our lovely speakers could come back up, that would be great. Well done, everybody. Olivia, did we have any questions in the online? Okay, cool. Have we got some questions from the floor?
My question's for Clytie. Can you hear me all right? Thank you for a great presentation, all of you. Clytie, the community composting really interests me as well. I'm also a permaculturalist, so a lot of things in common. We recently did something for a university, and we were looking at how we could do some clever things on site, and I'm just curious about the prison example, is what kind of population was there and how that program actually really worked. Because I just thought there might be some translation into something like a uni from the prison model, you know?
Yeah. And what the prisoners actually did was once they got their system up and running, which originally was from worm farms that they built just out of scrap stuff lying around, and then into the black soldier fly, they then wrote with the help of, it's also helped by the Sustainability in Prisons Project, which is a not-for-profit group, but they actually, the prisoners themselves wrote a manual for how to run it. The view that other prisons could do it around the state and around the country, around the world, it's actually available online too. If you look up Sustainability in Prisons Project in Washington State, you can find this. It's called Foundations to Composting. And it's actually designed to be a peer-to-peer training program. So it's not someone standing up the front as the keeper of all knowledge. It's very much, you know, level-to-level sort of tuition. So I recommend you look at that and you might find some things to work with there. Yeah.
Any other questions? I have a question for Sarah. We do contamination management as part of my team. I'm really curious about that aggressive component, even though they are quite small, the hostile. What procedures do you have in place to protect your staff from hostile people?
Yeah, it was quite interesting hearing Cleanaway before say they wear GoPros and have a radio. We've never encountered anything too threatening so far, thank God. Obviously if the person is beyond educating reason, we just leave. Okay. If it seems particularly threatening, we'll end the bin inspection and go back to the office and let everyone we know. We use Microsoft Teams to, because often we are the only person starting at 6 o'clock in the morning times. We check in on there, letting people know we've arrived and done our job safely. So yeah, we have a few things in place, but yeah, thankfully nothing too threatening has happened. Mostly verbal insults, not anything too physical.
No, that's good to hear. We've only had one that was it was verbal, but the person got quite upset. I think how you react to verbal abuse can be something that you've got to learn as well. And hopefully most people don't need to learn because they don't encounter it. So that's great. I had a question for Clytie as well. With the land that they're using, like in New York for the composting, with the funding, is the funding for the infrastructure and the land as well? Like, is the land provided by the city, or is that something that, like, where does the land come from?
Well, generally, it's usually connected with community gardens, but not always. There was a site, like a couple of sites that are sort of council land, but not being used for anything. And a lot of, especially in New York, a lot of it was empty blocks that, because they had a problem back in the 70s where there was a lot of just demolition of buildings, and then nothing would be built in its place, and then there was just, you know, drug use and dead cars and things, and then a lot of local people moved into those, so they were actually private land, and moved into that space and turned it into community gardens and things. And then sometimes that has just been a peppercorn lease with the owners. Sometimes the city's bought it. It's a bit of a combination of things.
Okay.
Combination of public, private land and agreements.
Oh,
yeah.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Hi, Sarah. The bin inspections you were doing were mainly in Victoria, is that correct? I'm just wondering, with the changes in New South Wales, with the compostable packaging in organic bins being removed, how you would approach that in terms of the communication, because that's a whole other gamut that's sort of unfolding in New South Wales, and I expect that will translate across the country. over time.
Sorry, I'm not across. What's happening there? Sorry.
So New South Wales have removed packaging, what was compostable packaging that most states still keep in their green bins, out of the green bins because of the PFAS component.
Just like any change, I suppose it's just about getting that messaging across there, because I think one difficulty we have is that every council still does it differently, even though by 2030 it's meant to be a standardised system, and obviously councils can't really do anything about that because the contractors that they send their materials to don't accept certain things like a liner. So yeah, I think just making sure you're consistently doing that messaging. We constantly are checking councils' websites and communicating with our client council to make sure we have the correct information as well, because it is unfortunately changing frequently. Like one we've had recently is liquid paperboard products. Some councils accept them, some don't. So yeah, because we do contract with so many councils, we have to refresh our memories to make sure we're sending the right message out there. So yeah, a tricky one.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this has been a really interesting session. I think the take home for me is it's really amazing to see all the different techniques that our speakers have been using to engage and have a discussion with the community and actually get them participating. You know, I was blown away by OzHarvest brand recognition. I was blown away by Michelle talking about how just having one sentence in a different language can really make the people feel like they're involved. I didn't know that community composting could happen on the sort of scale that you were talking about, Clytie, and Amanda, Sarah, it's been great to see a contamination management program that is so interactive. You know, I always thought if you wanted to tag somebody's bin, you want to try and get as far away from the bin after that as possible. So the fact that you're actually engaging in a conversation, I think is really amazing. And so big round of applause for everybody.